Welcome back everyone. So yes, we haven't done a side dish for some time and I thought we're going to do one today. I've chosen the courgettes or zucchini as a subject matter, and I found an old recipe from bocuse where it's called the cannelloni of courgettes. So if you're into crafting stuff, that's going to be interesting because we're going to have to decorate and empty a courgette and then fill that little, make it look like a cannelloni and fill it with a stuffing made with ricotta cheese, onion, there's some eggs, walnuts, and another types of cheese. So it's like a 2 cheese walnut kind of filling with onion. That sounds quite interesting. The whole lot is going to be cooked then in the oven. And to be honest, I've never tried this. So I am quite curious. Let's do this. So here we are, let's have a look at the ingredients we're going to be using for that recipe. We've got 4 medium-sized courgettes in the back there, and all what you see in the front is going to be for the stuffing. Of course, all the ingredients will be listed in the video description. Now, I've got one little worry here. I'm quite concerned with the amount of eggs given in that recipe. You see, this is for the stuffing. We've got the ricotta, walnut cheese, some onion and shallots in there that we have to blend together with the raw eggs. But 3 whole eggs with that sounds to me that it might be quite a wet mix. So we're gonna go through the motion, but I'm gonna be very careful with those eggs. Well, okay, let's start with making the stuffing first. So we're gonna start our stuffing by cooking slightly the onions and shallots. So I've got 1 tablespoon of olive oil. So why do we use olive oil in here? Because it is a recipe from the south of France. And this is a typical thing. Every time you see courgettes, bell peppers, tomatoes, that sort of things, and olive oil and no cream, it is usually a recipe from the south. And it is, of course, this one from the French Riviera. So we're going to mix that and leave it to cook for about 2 to 3 minutes. So a little cooking note here, we're cooking this on medium heat, no coloration. And you can see the types of cuts that I've used. This is not so big, but it is labeled in a bocuse recipe as a rough chop. Now this is a chef rough chop. So be careful with the terminology, because a rough chop, you may think, oh, I'm going to use big blocks of onion, but they're not going to fit inside a courgette. So always be careful. So make sure you get something like this, quite small in fact. Perfect. It's been 3 minutes. I've turned my heat off and I'm going to put this back in my little bowl here. Okay, so I've got all my ingredients ready and look what happened to my walnuts. They're gone small, yes, because there's a lot of translation that needs to be made in these old recipes. So the recipe says you have to chop the walnut thinly. And I thought, I'm going to use a knife. And then it says in bracket, it is best to use a grated, like grated walnuts. Is there such things? So I've just used a small food processor and process it because I think this is the intention for the recipe, to have this kind of powder-like form. And now we're going to start to mix everything together. Now, one little advice I can give you, when you've got recipes like this that tells you, you have to mix this and that, make sure you use a very large bowl, okay? That is super important. All right, are you ready for the mixing? Let's go. Let's call it Operation Courgette. First, it says we need to add the walnut. And the walnut, I think they're going to absorb a lot of moisture, for the egg. Then the ricotta. The ricotta is a bit salty, so be careful. It is actually not the ricotta we should be using. It is another cheese from Savoie, which is similar to ricotta, but I've just used ricotta. So, okay. So you see the whole mix becomes really, really dry. Onions and shallots that have been pre-cooked for 2 or 3 minutes. Okay. Still very, very dry. And then the cheese. Now the cheese, you know what? That's a lot of cheese. But anyway, let's put it in. I've mixed everything. I'm going to add my little bit of salt, even though I'm very wary. And as you can see, it is actually very dry. And finally comes the eggs. This is where we're going to go. I'm going to go one by one. Okay, so let's break one and add it in. Ready? Okay, let's go. Egg number 1. All in. It says whole eggs. Okay, and then we're going to mix this gently. See how wet it becomes. All right, so after 1 egg, you see that mix? That is already getting wet. And that's my worry. I'm going to add the 2nd egg, but already 3 eggs. I'm thinking, wow, these are small eggs as well. 3 eggs is going to be a soup. So I'm going to add the 2nd one, and I think I'm going to hold on there. I'm not going to add the 3rd one because this is never gonna be stiff enough. I'm gonna end up with a soup, and we have to leave this to rest in the fridge a little bit, so it's gonna dry up a bit, but you know what? For me, 2 eggs there, it's enough. 3 eggs was too much. So that mix is ready. I'm gonna put this in the fridge while we're preparing the courgette. Now sometimes trying to make certain recipe at home can have its limitation. Now for here you can see this is not a restaurant. We have to make little stripes on here, and we need to empty the courgette. And for that, well, at home you can use either a peeler, otherwise you have to use a channel knife for that little part here. We're going to see how to use that, and a melon boiler. And don't even think I've got the right size. You need a very, very small one to go inside the courgette. So we'll see how we go, but that's the tool we're going to be using. Okay, so nothing super fancy to start with. We're just going to have to cut the end. I'm going to keep some. And I think a larger size courgette will work better. And the end over here. Of course, I've washed the courgette thoroughly. Okay, and now we're going to make these little stripes there. Right, for the stripe, we're going to be using that, you see that little blade inside there? And we're going to run it along here to try to make a dent. But it's not easy. This is a supermarket kind of tool. It is really not the best quality. I've kind of lost my one. But if you press down, okay, this is the kind of effect you're going to have. So the whole idea is to try to grab something there, and as much as you can, make that thing work for you. And make stripes. I'm going to keep on going and stripe that thing up as much as I can. So once you're done, you get something like this, another straightest of lines. And you're just going to have to cut this in half so before we can carve. So this is the problem. This is a large size here. This is the thinner size on there. So we'll see how we go. But I'm just going to make like these little chunks. I'm not going to make them too deep, but it's going to be a nightmare to empty. Right. So I've changed location because the light is pretty harsh, but I wanted to show you what we're trying to do here with the melon butter is to carve the inside. And I don't know if you can see the seeds inside of a courgette, and on the outer rim we've got the flesh. And most of the time, this is the easiest part to remove is always the core. So we're gonna plant our channel knife. We're gonna start to make a dent like this, and little bit by little bit, I'm gonna repeat this, and I'm gonna go inside. And I'm going to drill, bit by bit. Now, a bit like a mole, making a little tunnel. All right, I've done my first one, and look, we can see all the way inside. But you can know that I've gone a little bit far, and that's a large gap. We don't have too much stuffing, so be very careful. Just remove the seeds, and little bit by little, you go inside like that, and try to leave some flesh on the other. So I'm going to do the same for all of the courgettes that I have. Yes, I'm done, finally. Now, if you're good at art and craft, like if you're good at school at these things, you will love these things. Because as you can see, I'm not very good. It hasn't been very, very straight. Now, by the way, the peeler, and you can recreate the same effect by peeling away a little bit at a time all around the courgettes to get these stripes. You won't have as many, but you will get, you have a similar effect. So now I'm going to take my stuffing out, and using that tray, not to put things everywhere, I'm going to put the stuffing inside each of those. Now let's get started. I've got the tray, I've got a plate to put my little tubs here. Now let's quote the obvious, a spoon that fits inside. Don't take a huge spoon, that's not going to go in. So, and then it's just a matter of taking some of that mix, and bit by bit, we're going to put some of it in. It's going to be hard because you see it's semi-liquid, you see it start to go out on the other side. You see what I told you? It was wet. So I'm going to have to go more horizontally like this. Thought it was going to be more stiffer, and bit by bit, we're going to have to put it in like this. That's not going to be an easy job. I'm all done, and yes, I just had enough stuffing to fill all of the courgettes here, and I've got, I think, about 1 tablespoon extra. So if you're at home, the advice I can give you, be very careful with the egg. If you use large eggs, I think 1 large egg should be enough. It's better to have something that is a bit stiffer than more liquid and runny, because I've got my reservation with this one, what's going to happen. I'm a bit worried what's going to happen when we're going to be cooking it, okay? But it should be fine, okay? So from here, you're going to preheat your oven at 160 degrees Celsius, and now we're going to prepare our baking dish and put this in. You must have been thinking like, oh, we forgot to use the garlic. We didn't, because there it is. Actually, the garlic is just there for the dish. And it's a bit like the gratin. It's the old-fashioned way of rubbing your dish like this with garlic. Now, my baking dish here, I have to say it's too big. That's the only one I have. I really need to buy some more of those. Like a medium-sized baking dish is super useful, actually, rather than big or small. Okay, but like this, we're going to have ample space. So we're going to rub the garlic at the bottom, and then put a bit of olive oil, and put our little rolls, the cannellini of courgette on top. Okay, let's just add a little Up, a little line of oil there. So nothing special for the courgette. Now, having a large dish like this, it's kind of handy because I'm just sure I've got enough space because I don't want the whole thing to be too crowded, as you can see here. And you see, it can be hard to, so you have to arrange everything, but you want to have a bit of space, so use a large one in the middle. I'm going to use the thin one right there. I can make a bit of space and fit. Oh, actually, it's enough size, perfect. Now the final touch here, we're going to do a grind of salt and a grind of pepper and straight into the oven because that mix is runny as, I don't know what's going to happen. So I'm going to put this in the oven, 40 minutes. At 160 degrees Celsius, I put the equivalent on Fahrenheit on the screen, and halfway through, after 20 minutes, we're going to have to turn them over. So make sure they're cooked everywhere. And fingers crossed that the mix doesn't flow out everywhere. Now, it's cooked. I had my fingers crossed, and the worst that I thought was going to happen happened. The mix totally spilled out. And as I was saying at the beginning of the video, I had a feeling it was not going to work. So what is that telling you? It's telling us that basically, doesn't matter where the recipe comes from, even if it's signed by some great chefs, even French chefs, there are always mistakes, and that happens all the time. So I had to go in recipe saving mode, and I had to make a little train of courgette to avoid the liquid to spill out all the time, even though it tried to escape here and there, and that's the best we could get here. So when you get these kinds of scenarios, it's no use to panic. There's always ways to fix things, and so we're going to surely look at what's dry, and I might cut off, some of the ugly stuff here, chop it up with a knife, and try to arrange it on the plate. But for you at home, I think what you should do differently. Okay, that's the big lesson here when you get something like that. In my view here, the first culprit is the egg. As I said, one egg would have been way enough. That's the first thing. So I will adjust this in the recipe listing in the video description. Also, the walnuts, the cutting of the walnuts, onion and shallots slightly chunkier to hold the liquid a little bit. And the other thing I would have done differently, if I would have made that recipe again, let's say, instead of having the holes on either side of the courgette, which is stipulated in the recipe to have holes everywhere, I will take something this size, I will empty the courgette all the way, almost at the end, but I will leave a bottom there, and I will make a container out of the courgettes, and I would have my courgettes, and what I'm going to try to do after, have them to stand them like that, upright like this, and cook them like this in a circle, and top them at the end with cheese or breadcrumb or something like this. So I think this is my recommendation, but there's still some value in the recipe here because, of course, the mix makes sense, and I still want to try it. So I'm going to arrange the uglytons here, put them on a plate, and we'll do a tasting. Well, it looks like how a cannelloni of a courgette have transformed into courgette towers, so to speak. It was kind of hard to readapt, but this is the idea I was talking about. That's the way I would normally do it, I think, where you fill the whole thing in, and you can have a nice kind of cross. And the presentation is slightly better when it's upwards rather than flat, because the courgette goes a bit funny. But hey, let's try that mix. I noticed that the crumbs here are pretty good. This is the mix that was, hang on. When it's burned like this, it's actually quite nice. I'm going to take one of those and have a taste. Actually, when it's a little bit burned, it's actually not bad. And that's it, people. We are done with that recipe that is not anymore the cannelloni of courgette, but I will call it the courgette towers. It's been completed. And yes, just to tell you that it was fun to craft some courgette, but sometimes when you make recipe, it doesn't always go your way. But there's always ways to turn things around. So don't get angry and throw things everywhere. So, it didn't work, keep cool, try to rearrange stuff, and look at this picture. You can always serve something. I will give you all the detail in the video description on how to arrange things, the right measurement to get this correct if you want to try it, because it is still something quite interesting. But that's it for me. I will see you next week for another French cooking video, this time something that works better. And until then, have fun. Bye-bye.